All right, I am back here. Just heard a clip of last year's fantasy MVP, Lamar Jackson, scoring a big touchdown against the Bengals. Getting ready for your fantasy football drafts this year. Thrilled to have on the podcast today somebody who talks a lot of fantasy football for NFL Network, NFL.com, and Rotoballer. Michael Florio is on the podcast today. Michael, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. I have to say, I'm very excited for fantasy football this year, but it is going to be a little weird trying to do it in the COVID era.
Yeah, I'm super excited. It is going to be weird. I'm hoping, right, so far we haven't seen a lot of positive tests in the NFL from players even, so I'm hoping that continues over once the games start. It is definitely going to be a weird season, but I will take fantasy football however we can get it.
Yeah, for sure. And what are some things you've noticed, like in terms of like maybe when you're getting ready for your draft, what you're trying to see from your leagues or sort of adjust for possibilities of dealing with this situation?
I think for me, the biggest difference, and it was something that I was going to change in my approach anyway, because I was looking back the last couple of seasons and I realized I kept making the same mistake. But I think in 2020, there's even more of a reason to just chase upside. Like, I like to build a solid base in the early rounds, and then like at like rounds 4, 5, even like 6 on from there, I'm just targeting players with really high ceilings, and because I believe this year like players can go down for any reason, right? Like we could avoid Will Fuller because of the hamstring issues he's had in his career, but every single player is more likely to miss time this year than ever before. So I'm okay taking that risk, especially with the added volume that Will Fuller is expected to see with DeAndre Hopkins. So for me, it's all about going upside and talent, because I'm not worrying so much like in normal years about depth charts and like that stuff all matters. But this year, like in the later rounds, I'm definitely more concerned with just who can give me the highest upside.
Yeah, it definitely makes some sense. And let's put this out there. Let's say you happen to be lucky enough to get the number one pick in your draft. Who would be your top option at number one?
For me, it's still Christian McCaffrey. It's a lot like Mike Trout, right, in fantasy baseball. Like, is Mike Trout going to be the number one player every year? No, he consistently hasn't been for years. But is Mike Trout every year going to be one of the top 5 players in the game? No questions asked, likely top 3? Yes, he is. And that's Christian McCaffrey, right? Like, I know last year, everyone likes to say he's not going to be able to redo what he did last year. I wouldn't expect him to, because he had the second best fantasy season ever. Only 2006 with Damian Tomlinson had better. But then also, people like to say, oh, no running back has finished as the RB1 2 years in a row since Clinton Portis back in 02 and 03. That's true, but it wouldn't be true if Christian McCaffrey didn't sit out week 17 of the 2018 season, because he only played, I believe it was like 5 or 10 snaps, came out real early in the first quarter, and then Saquon Barkley had a big game that week and finished 0.3 fantasy points ahead of Christian McCaffrey. So he would have been the RB1 the last 2 years. I think he is the safest floor of all those high-end running backs. I think he has a safer floor than Saquon. We saw what happened last year with Saquon. And then also, you can't tell me that someone has a higher ceiling when Christian McCaffrey's ceiling last year was the second greatest season we've ever seen.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sitting here next to a fantasy football trophy I won having McCaffrey on my team last year. I don't have number 1 this year. I'm down at number 9, so I'm going to be a little selfish here and say, what should I do with the 9th pick in a half-point PPR draft?
I'll fully admit, like, picks 5 through 9 don't like. I'd rather be on either side of the turn this year. But at pick 9, I'm still going to be going best running back available. That is my approach in the early rounds this year, as long as the top 13 running backs are on the board. At pick 9, I would probably be looking, if Derrick Henry goes, because he normally goes in the top 9, I'd probably be taking one of Austin Eckler or Kenyon Drake. But I know that's not for everyone. Some people don't feel the same way I do. You can't go wrong, though, ever with a Michael Thomas or Devontae Adams, but I would be going with one of those running backs.
Good to know. And the next big question I want to ask you is obviously the quarterbacks, the 2 big point guys, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. Where in the draft should you be taking them this year?
I will not consider Lamar Jackson in the first round. I don't really like him in the early second round either. But when we start getting to the back half of the second round, early third round, I have no problem taking Lamar Jackson there or Patrick Mahomes. Really, the only issue with Mahomes is we're hoping that he can add that running element to his game. We saw it in the playoffs in the Super Bowl, but There's no guarantee that he will. So I'm a little bit more hesitant when it comes to Mahomes and Lamar at that price, but I think that is the range if you want one of those two guys, late second, early third round.
Yeah, for sure. Those guys tend to go early. A lot of the savvier fantasy owners say, you know what, I'll wait for a while. I'll build my receiver depth, my running back depth, and get a quarterback later on. Who are some values you like a quarterback this year?
Yeah, well, first, I do think the second tier of quarterbacks, not those big two, but after that, the Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and Josh Allen. I think those guys, because everyone likes to wait on quarterbacks, those guys are now becoming a value in my opinion because you can get like Dak Prescott, who was the QB2 last year and has, I think, the best weapons around him of anyone in football. You get him in the 6th, 7th round sometimes. So if that is the case, I have no issues pulling those guys up and taking them. But if I miss out on them, to me, Matt Stafford is someone I really like as that low-end QB1. And if I miss out on him, for me, they're all high-end QB2s. There's a top tier I have in my QB2s with Daniel Jones, Cam Newton, Gardner Minshew, Ryan Tannehill, and Joe Burrow. The quarterbacks who have good weapons around them are in favorable situations for the most part, and then also can add fantasy points with their legs because that is the secret weapon to having a good fantasy quarterback is can they add those free points with their legs.
Yeah, that's certainly true. You brought up Cam Newton. It's a very interesting situation he's in because he goes to New England, hasn't had a lot of luck with the shoulder injury the past couple of years, and he's going to a system where he's not done a lot of weapons outside of Julian Edelman. How do you feel about his fantasy outlook this year?
I like Cam Newton, especially because you do not have to take him as one of the top 12 quarterbacks off the board. Like, I have him ranked as my QB 13, but you don't need to pay that high of a price to get him. He's starting to go higher in drafts, but everything we're hearing out of the Patriots camp is that the competition was over, and there was never really a competition, in my opinion. From the start, I said Cam was the starter, and if they were talking about platooning or anything like that, I just said if you're not using Cam full-time as your starting quarterback, it means that Cam Newton is not right. But it's looking like Cam Newton is, and we just know the upside that Cam possesses with his legs. He consistently for years was a top 5 quarterback and only has thrown for 4,000 yards once in his career because he can run so well and so efficiently near the goal line especially. So I like picking Cam as my QB2 because the upside is really, I still think, a top 10 quarterback if he is anywhere close to that old rushing Cam that we used to see.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun at quarterback this year. The receiver position is also interesting to me because obviously you have a clear-cut number one in Michael Thomas. I think a bunch of similar options after him. So how do you sort out the guys after Michael Thomas? Who do you prioritize?
So I think Devontae Adams has to be the second wide receiver off the board. And for me, the only two that I would consider in the first round are Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams. But with the first round being so running back heavy, you're starting to see Adams go consistently in round 2. So I really like that value there. After him, I think the next two should be Julio Jones and Tyreek Hill. But for me, my wide receiver 5 is a surprise to many. It's Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson last year finished as the wide receiver 8. He was top 5 in targets. And this year, he has even less competition for targets around him. It's Anthony Miller, Tariq Cohen, and the ghost of Jimmy Graham, and that's it. Plus, he has a quarterback upgrade in Nick Foles. And regardless, both of his quarterbacks love to throw to the slot, and that is where Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller are going to split their time. So I like both of those guys and where they're going.
That's very interesting. And also, I think another thing that's intriguing about the receiver group this year is that there's been so many talented rookies in this class that came out here. We had Jerry Jeudy go to the Broncos, Henry Ruggs go to the Raiders, CeeDee Lamb to the Cowboys, among others. What do you think about this rookie receiver core? Who are some of the guys in there you think could be good fantasy contributors this year?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the rookie wide receivers class as a whole this year. It has so much talent. Like, long-term, I'm not worried at all. I'm just worried because the weird preseason this year, no preseason games, reduced amount of training camp. Receiver is a position that relies on timing and precision. So I am a little bit concerned with the rookie wide receivers, especially early in the season. But my favorite, and someone that I have on almost all of my fantasy teams, and I've done a lot of drafts already, it's CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. This guy is so explosive, and they're going to use him in the slot, which just, makes my mouth water because you're going to have slot cornerbacks trying to line up and guard this huge freak athlete of a receiver. Plus, I like that you get him around wide receiver 40. He's starting to climb a little bit, but last year Randall Cobb was a top 45 wide receiver. That was with Amari Cooper being top 10 and Michael Gallup being top 24. So I think the upside with a pass-happier head coach now, the upside because of how explosive Len is, and he might already be their best red zone option, this guy has league-winning upside.
That's pretty good. Now, that would put that in my notes. I'm getting ready for my drafts coming up. Another interesting thing I want to talk about this year is the tight end position, because last year going in the draft, I felt like, okay, there's only really three you really want to grab, which is Zach Ertz, George Kittle, and Travis Kelce. I feel like last year the position really deepened a bit. How do you feel about the tight end spot going into this year?
Yeah, so my approach when it comes to tight end is if I have a middle, like in the first round, if I'm like pick 5 or 6, so it comes back to me, and my top running backs are gone and the big 4 receivers are gone, the big 4, being Tyreek and Julio rounding out, I will take George Kittle there. And George Kittle is my tight end 1 this year. I would take Travis Kelce there too, but Travis Kelce usually goes early second round. So I take Kittle there, and if I miss out on them, I will usually wait, and then I'll take in like round 7 or 8 one of the high upside tight ends, that the ones that I think can make that step into the Mark Andrews tier, maybe even higher. And for me, those guys are Tyler Higbee, Evan Ingram, and then a little bit later, there's Hayden Hurst, who I like a lot. And then if I miss out on those guys too, there's a lot of guys I like later. And if I miss out on all those higher end guys, I'll double up on 2 of like Noah Fant, Mike Gesicki is someone I like a lot. Chris Herndon, who I'm really, really starting to pull back up. I had him as a tight end 1 last year, and that didn't work out, but I'm falling back for him again this year. Johnny Smith, another one. There's a lot of depth at the tight end position this year. So I'll double up on those 2 because we know if tight end has taught us anything in the past, they're not all going to hit. So if I had 2 of those upside tight ends in the double-digit round, well, then that only increases my odds of having one that can break out this year.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a good strategy. Let's talk some sleepers here. Who are some sleepers you like this year that you think aren't making enough hype right now?
Yeah, he's starting to get more hype, but Zach Moss is someone that I really like, and he's someone that you could still get in some drafts in the 10th, 11th round, I'm seeing, but in others, I've seen him go in the 9th. I've even seen him go in the 8th round of a couple. So he's getting a little bit higher price, but Zach Moss, I think, could compete there with Devin Singletary, not only to be a complimentary piece, but to really make some noise and take over a large chunk of that job there, I think. Some other sleepers, I'm trying to double-digit round guys that I like. Well, no, my quarterback position, to go back to that. Gardner Minshew is my favorite sleeper there. Jay Gruden is the offensive coordinator, and Jay Gruden's history as play caller has led to the 2 best fantasy seasons we got out of Kirk Cousins and the 2 best fantasy seasons we got out of Andy Dalton ever. So it's an offensive coordinator that leads to passing success, and plus it's one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And it is a quarterback that can add valuable points with his legs. So Gardner Minshew late is another one of my favorite sleepers. Matt Breida is someone I target in the double-digit rounds. Oh, Damian Harris is a big one I think people should be looking at. Bryce Love is another one in the teams that you can get that I like a lot. And even Darrell Henderson, he's starting to fall down boards. I'm a Cam Akers guy, but anytime there's these backs that have a chance of being a featured back in a pretty good offense, I think in the double-digit rounds, I think you should be taking that shot.
I agree with that, and I think Bud Light is obviously a big fan of the Gardner Minshew thing. I don't think I would take him in the first round for the beer money, but he's somebody I would think about later in the drafts.
Yeah, I wouldn't be taking him in the first round. If you're doing that, that's a mistake. Because you get this guy well into the 12th, 13th, 14th round in some drafts. He goes undrafted in some shallower league drafts too, so you don't got to pay up at all. But if you like Bud Light and you want to have a good time, I mean, you could take him in the first round.
Yeah, we could, but I have a little too many shekels on the line to try that strategy. So
I wouldn't advise it.
I would not either. Let's go to the bus. Who are some guys you would tell the people to stay away from?
For me, this year, the people I'm staying away from are those boring, low ceiling but safe floor players. You know, like those type of players. Like James White is one that comes to mind. It was Jamison Crowder before all the other Jets receivers started to go down. But you know those players that you draft just in case one of your starters gets hurt or has a bye week, you could plug them in and they'll get, 10 points, but they really won't win you a week. I'm avoiding those kinds of players, and I'm going for the highest ceilings that I can get because those safe, boring players, first of all, I think if you need to put them in your starting lineup, your lineup is already worse. And second of all, you're going to hold on to them all year for a couple of weeks that you get them into your starting lineup. Whereas if I use my picks on these high ceiling players and they don't pan out in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then I'm just going to have a bench full of spots that I can take more upside shots on the waiver wire. And the way you win fantasy football championships is by finding, a breakout player or two in the draft and a breakout player or two on the waiver wire. So I want to take as many of those upside shots as I can, trying to find those breakout players, rather than taking a boring player in the draft and the opportunity cost it takes there. That's one upside shot I didn't take, and then holding them on my bench all year in case you got to use them. And what those safe players lead to, in my opinion, is a 4th, 5th, 6th place finish and a first round fantasy exit in the playoffs. Like, I don't play to lose in the first round. I play to win a championship.
Yeah, the one guy that came to my mind, you're talking about that model, I feel like it was Larry Fitzgerald. I feel like as a guy, he's a classic example of that right now. I feel like he's got a very safe floor. He gets a couple catches a week at 50, 60 yards, maybe a touchdown. I think his upside definitely gets capped up by DeAndre Hopkins coming over there.
Oh, yeah. Larry Fitzgerald, Hall of Fame, and one of the best receivers ever. I don't even consider him in fantasy. Like, it's like he's retired in my mind because I have never drafted him and I don't plan on it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And as a Jet fan, I do want to leave with one Jet-related question in terms of fantasy receivers here. Robbie Anderson leaves, goes to Carolina, where he's working with Teddy Bridgewater now in a crowded receiver room. Rashad Perriman, big breakout at the end of last year, goes to the Jets, where he could be the number one receiver if he's healthy. Which one of those guys would you like better in fantasy?
Oh, it's not even close for me. It's Rashad Perriman. I actually, before Perriman got hurt, I have him ranked higher than Jamison Crowder because to me, Crowder is one of those players. He might have a handful of nice games, but most weeks he's going to give you between 8 and 12 fantasy points. Rashad Perriman, on the other hand, if things click and he can replace Robbie Anderson, who before, up until, actually I think it's right up until now in Sam Darnold's career, Robbie Anderson still has the most receiving yards and touchdowns from Sam Darnold. So I think that big play weapon that they need on the outside, I think Denzel Mims is the long-term answer for that. But for this year, I think it's Rashad Perriman, and he just has a higher ceiling and is someone that I would take the upside shot on there. But my favorite target in the Jets offense, because you're a Jet fan, it's just Chris Herndon, because you get him around 12 or later, and Sam Darnold, we're hearing reports right now out of Jet camp that he is just throwing the ball often to Chris Herndon. I think a lot of targets are going to get funneled his way.
Yeah, it does sound good. Thanks for all the info today, Michael. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow you on social media and keep up with your excellent fantasy football work this year?
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, they can follow me on Twitter at Michael Florio. That's the easiest place to get all my work in one place.
All right, Michael. Awesome. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, and there you have it. That was Michael Florio from NFL Network, NFL.com, Roto Ballers. A lot of good fantasy football nuggets in there for you if you are getting ready for your drafts this week. Sure, definitely check out his work all over the internet. Go to follow Michael F. Florio on Twitter. Up next, we're going to begin our Show Me the Money NFL coverage here. Second year in a row, we're going to do the NFL over-unders with the great Joe D'Aloisio right after this.